This is John Musgrave. Thank you for coming to the podcast. If you like this content or this episode, please click like or even subscribe or hit that thumbs up button on your screen, and that'll help more people find us. Thanks for listening. To Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, we could have come to sooner, but Jeremiah's ministry spans so long that I thought it was better for us to look at all these pre-exilic prophets, other pre-exilic prophets first. And because Jeremiah goes on, Jeremiah's history goes beyond the exile. The bulk of his ministry is before the exile, but he's ministering all through the three phases of deportations. And then after the last deportation, he continues to minister and to give us some of his book there. And so now, with everything kind of already behind us, having already looked at those who basically who preach and then give their book prior to the exile, we get to Jeremiah, who is preaching for a long time prior to the exile, starting with Josiah, and then continues ministering after the exile. And then I hate that automated stuff. I do. It's like, I don't want that.
There when you need her, and especially there when you don't.
Yeah. So Jeremiah then is delivering his book after the final deportation, and after some things have happened historically after the final deportation. So let's take a look here. A lot of interesting things in Jeremiah. Who knows why that picture's there?
Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
Yes, because Jeremiah was a bullfrog. He was a good friend of Bob's. Yes.
My oldest grandson Jeremiah, I had that. You guys don't.
As your ringtone?
I had that tape.
Oh,
in my
did you?
car
Yeah.
Playing, and he goes, "I'm not a bullfrog. I'm a boy."
That's
That was
funny.
not him.
That's funny. Was that Credence, or who was that? Or Three Dog Night?
Three Dog Night.
Yeah, Three Dog Night. Those groups are close. John Fogerty's coming to DPAC. I started seeing those advertisements. He's the guy who wrote most of Credence Clearwater Revival stuff. Okay, our author. Let's see, Pat, where do you? Would you read this for us?
Jeremiah was from Anatoth, a town in Benjamin that was near Jerusalem. Jeremiah was a priest of the tribe of Levi, who was called to be a prophet.
Okay. So Jeremiah is one of the people we see in the Old Testament. There are several of these that we see in the Old Testament who occupy two offices of the Old Testament. What are our three offices that we see in the Old Testament? Prophet, priest, and king. Yeah, and so which two does Jeremiah have? Prophet and priest, yeah. So he's born a priest. How are you born a priest? Yeah, you're descended from Aaron, and you're a man. That's how you're born a priest. But then God calls this priest to be a prophet. Okay. So we can see that in 1:1. Go ahead and open your Bibles to Jeremiah. Okay, and Anna, are you there?
Yep.
Can you read 1:1 for us?
Yep. She was the last time I looked.
The word of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, one of the priests and
Anathoth, you got it.
in the territory of Benjamin.
Okay, good. So he's a priest. He's an Anathoth. He's in a Benjamite town. He's not a Benjamite, but the priests were given Levite towns all around in all the territories of Israel. So they were given special towns for them that were just for them, for Levites, given out by Joshua. And so he's in the territory of Benjamin. Where's Benjamin in the land of Israel? Okay, it borders Judah. And so where is it in relation to the whole thing? North, south, east, or west, or central?
Northeast.
Central.
Central.
It's right in the middle of the country. Okay? So you all got that right. I heard all those right answers. So Jerusalem is right at the border of Benjamin and Judah. Okay, but Benjamin is more central. And so Judah's huge and takes up, almost all the south and what becomes the south. But just the first thing north of that, on the north border of Judah, is Benjamin, but it doesn't go all the way across. It's just kind of in the central area there, and it's kind of sneaks a little sliver sneaks over to the top of the Jordan River and where the Jordan flows into the Dead Sea. Okay. Next, we're to Sydney. Bob's favorite picture. Bob likes this, I know. So Sydney, would you read that's up here?
Jeremiah lived in ministry in Jerusalem and then in Egypt from 627 to 585 BC. The events of his time are recorded in 2 Kings 22 to 25.
Okay. So 2 Kings 25 is the end of Kings there, and so Jeremiah's at the end of Judah and a little bit beyond, and so we can find the time of his ministry from chapters 22 to 25. You see his ministering is from 627 to 585. You can see that in verse 2. Look down in your Bibles. Laura, would you read verse 2 for us there? And 3.
Sure.
2 and 3.
The word of the Lord came to him in the 13th year of the reign of Josiah.
Okay, so we're dated here. This is an easy date book. So here we are. Here's the start of Josiah's kingship, which goes to 609. And so 640 minus 13 equals
627.
627. Woo! So there's where we get the date there. Okay, go on, Laura.
So the reign of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah, and through the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, down to the 5th month of the 11th year of Zedekiah, son of Josiah, king of Judah, when the people of Jerusalem lived into exile.
Okay, so that's it when he's ministering in the land, but we see that in the book itself that he stays in Jerusalem and in Judah after the main the final deportation, the destruction of the temple. He's still there, and in fact we have narrative beyond that. But so that's the dating of Jeremiah. So he has a long ministry starting with Josiah, and part of that faithful inswell with Josiah as king, and then goes all the way through past the burning of the temple. Okay, so that's Jeremiah the man when he's ministering. And now we look at Jeremiah the book, the document he wrote. Okay, so always the document the prophet writes, the book the prophet writes, is written after all the preaching's done. Sounds like an Earth, Wind, and Fire song. After the preaching's done. Okay. Jeremiah the book. Next, so Joyce, where do you? Would you read that for us?
His book records the release of Jehoiachin from prison in 562 BC, and that Jehoiachin ate at the table of the Babylonian king, Evil Merodach, 562 to 560 BC, son of Nebuchadnezzar, until the day Jehoiachin died. Thus the book was probably written not long after 560 BC.
Okay. So we've got this in Jeremiah, this recording that Jehoiachin was imprisoned in Babylon, which happens at 598. Jehoiachin gets sent off, and Zedekiah gets placed on the throne. Zedekiah was the third son of Josiah to reign as king. And that he's released from prison. And during the days of Evil Merodach, who is a son of Nebuchadnezzar, and we know historically where that puts us, Evil Merodach's reign was 562 to 560. And so because that's recorded in the book, we know the book wasn't written until that happened. Could have been written the week after that happened, that Jehoiachin was eating at the table of Evil Merodach and in this honored position. But very similar, this is very similar to what other book tells us that Jehoiachin was released from his prison and was able to take off his prison clothes and given glorified robes and ate at the table of the king in Babylon. Think through it. If you don't know it, you can just think through it. Where would that be? Second Kings. That's the end of Second Kings. Second Kings ends on after God proving to his people, here's why you deserve the exile. That's First and Second Kings. The whole book is about here's why you deserve the exile. That's the theme of First and Second Kings. Here's all you did, and here's how patient I was with you. Here are all the chances you had. Here's how evil you were, and here's what. And then you were exiled. But there's this little note of hope at the end of Second Kings 25. And it gives this note of hope but Jehoiachin was released from his prison in Babylon, and he was able to take off his prison clothes, and he ate at the king's table, the fine food at the king's table, until the day he died. Okay, yeah, Bob.
It's gonna be a stupid question, but is evil
Everyone, get ready to laugh. Here comes a stupid.
evil Merodach? Is he evil or his name is evil?
His name's evil. Yeah, good question.
I would
Yeah,
do that too.
yeah,
I just didn't want to ask it.
yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say if he
It's a name, not a description. Yes.
if he let him Jehoiachin eat at his table,
Yeah.
something like that was evil.
Yeah, yeah,
Did he ride a
Yeah.
motorcycle and do local jokes?
yeah. Evil. His nickname was Knievel. Yeah, yeah. Evil Knievel Merodach. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's Jeremiah the book. So the book is written then. Where are we in the exile? What are our exile years? From the main deportation to the return. Let's name that as our exile years.
597 and 538.
597 to 538 is when people arrive back. 539 is when they're released. So where is this book historically?
Like right before the release.
In the middle of the exile. Yeah. It could be right before the release, but we're pressing Jeremiah's age at this point. It could possibly have been written by, a student of Jeremiah who faithfully wrote down Jeremiah's words, that kind of thing. But it's a good thing, I think, to keep the named prophet as the actual author of the book. And so just as kind of it's not that people didn't live long. Daniel lived very long. He's exiled in 605, and he's still living at least at 536 back in Babylon. So that's a long life. So probably middle of the exile. So the book comes out during the middle of the exile. So all God's people, when this book comes out, are in exile somewhere or another. Okay, so we keep that in mind as we read the book of Jeremiah. He's writing the book to exiles, similarly to Kings. Okay, Kings has the same ending. Okay, it's written to exiles. Here's why you are where you are. Kings is saying, here's all the evil that your ancestors did. Here's how you earn the exile. But yet, little message at the end of the Kings, God is still gracious and watching over you, just like he was to Jehoiachin. And a big theme in Kings too is that the words of the prophets always come true. So you see a lot of that in Kings. So that's Jeremiah the book, written in the middle of the exile. So written to exiles. Jeremiah's written to exiles. Okay, not after the exile, not before. His preaching is largely before, but he's writing his book to exiles. All right, so Jeremiah ministry in the book. Apologies to those of you who are in the back. I just got to fit all this in one slide. And so here's and you've got a sheet that I've handed out in the past, and if you've lost that, just write on your welcome slip, and I'll get you another sheet of Jeremiah. That's this timeline. You've got a timeline where I think all the prophets are. I put all the prophets are, where their ministry is, where their book, that kind of thing. But right here, so we're looking, here's Kingdom's Division, 931. Here's a return from exile is happening here, 538. Here's roughly the end of Daniel's life there, 536. He's in Babylon. Here's Malachi, clear in 430. A couple generations after they've returned is Malachi. But Jeremiah is right here writing. And so here's, the Jerusalem temple's flattened in 586 here. The return happens. There, this is 538 is the return. 536 is the completion of the foundation of the temple. But from here, you can see what's the ministry is down here from 627, and then covering this range here. Okay, just slightly after the destruction of the temple is Jeremiah's ministry. And then the book, in contrast, is we put out here, somewhere in the middle of this exile. So this blue line, that's a blue line here, is the exile, 597 to 538. And in the middle of that, Jeremiah drops his book. Okay. Historical setting. And so where did we leave off? Faith, are you up? Can you read the first bullet for us for our historical setting?
Jeremiah's prophesying occurred over a long period of time, primarily in Jerusalem, and began in 627 BC.
Mm-hmm. John, I've got a mouthful of donut. Can you read this?
He preached to the people during the years of its last 5 kings, Josiah 640 to 609,
Jehoahaz.
609, Jehoiakim 609 598, Jehoiachin 598 597, and Zedekiah 597 586.
Okay. So 5 kings, his ministry goes across. He's preaching to 5 different kings. We see elements of his book to each of these 5 kings. And then his ministry goes beyond Zedekiah and the burning of the temple as well. All right. So just kind of repeating this in Josiah's 13th year, which is 627, and then his book is here after the exile. Again, this is who goes in the 605 deportation? Daniel. 597 is which one? Yeah, the main one. Most of the people leave, are taken to Babylon here. And then what happens in 586? Yeah, temple destruction. Most of the people left here are killed, but some are exiled as well, off to Babylon. Okay, so Jeremiah, the kings of his ministry. So we got the 3 deportations mentioned there. So Josiah's there. See his kingship on the left there. And then in Josiah's 13th years when he starts. And then Jehoiakim picks up in 609 to 598. And then Jehoiachin is king for 3 months across the new year, from 598 to 597. And then I skipped Jehoahaz there. He has a 3-month ministry right there as well. And then Zedekiah, who's the last king to reign in Jerusalem. And then we've got a governor whom Nebuchadnezzar puts in charge of Judah among the Judahites that he leaves behind. And that's Gedaliah. And we get an account of him and at the end of 2 Kings as well. And you see a bunch about him and Jeremiah and his interaction with Gedaliah and those Israelites, Judahites who have been left behind by Nebuchadnezzar at the burning of the temple. There. And so Jeremiah ministers during Gedaliah's days, which are just a year, 2, somewhere in there. Yeah, Laura.
Was he, Israelite or a?
Yes, he was. Yeah. He was a Judahite. He was not in line to be king, but he was set over those who remained in the land by Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, Bill.
You might have said this earlier, but I missed it. Which of those kings is the one that put Jeremiah in a pit?
That's Jehoiakim.
Kim?
No, sorry. That's Zedekiah.
Zedekiah?
Yeah, puts him in a pit. Boy, I better double check. It's one of those 2 guys. I'm pretty sure it's Zedekiah.
I think it's one of those 5.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Zedekiah. And Zedekiah kind of secretly, in some ways, doesn't want to hurt Jeremiah and allows him to be rescued. In another way, he hates him because of what Jeremiah's message is. And he rejects Jeremiah's message. I'm 90% sure that's Zedekiah. Yeah. Okay. There's the flight to Egypt that occurs. And so Gedaliah gets assassinated. And then they come to Jeremiah and they say, "What should we do?" And Jeremiah says, "Okay, you going to listen to me or not?" And they say, "Oh, yes, we're going to listen to you." And Jeremiah says, "Here's the word of the Lord," which it is, "stay here in the promised land. Don't flee to Egypt." And you know what the people do? They flee to Egypt. But Jeremiah goes down with them, not as an act of disobedience, but to minister to them. And so there we go. We got a bunch of Jews down in Egypt. And from that, the Septuagint is created. The Septuagint is the translation of the Old Testament in Hebrew into Greek during the Greek period of domination brought about by Alexander the Great. And so you've got this whole population of Jews who are down in Egypt. And we see this when Jesus comes around too, and the gospel starts going out, that there's this whole crew of people down in Egypt because of these people that fled down there during this time. Things did not go well for them down there, but God preserved enough of them, but that by the time of the 300 BC, they're creating the Septuagint, which again is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which sometimes is quoted in the New Testament as opposed to the Old Hebrew Old Testament there. So there's a flight into Egypt that occurs in 585 after Gedaliah is assassinated and the people panic. So they go down to Egypt to escape Nebuchadnezzar, but they would have been safe had they just stayed there. Yeah, Stephen.
So the Septuagint, is that where we get the Deuterocanonical books?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you find different, let me know.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that it's a separate thing. Septuagint is just taking the Old Testament and translating it into Greek because in 300 BC, everyone in Egypt who was Jewish was speaking Greek in daily life.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the last recorded ministry of Jeremiah is he goes down to Egypt. You got a few things that occur down there between Jeremiah and the people down in Egypt. And then that's the last recorded narrative that we have there. And then we just have the simple recording that Jehoiachin had, or Jehoiachin had been released from prison in Babylon. We don't know if Jeremiah ever went to Babylon. We're not sure if he gave his book to the exiles in Babylon, or whether that was just in Egypt, or just what, or whether it spread around everywhere. We're not quite sure. So there's the evil Merodach there, 562 to 560, that Jeremiah records. And so there we go. The kings of his ministries, this span. You can barely see that. If we turned off the lights, you can see this shading here. But yeah, so long period of ministry for him that ends in while the people are in exile. Okay, next. Yeah, Matt.
To your point with Zedekiah, he was greeted by a bunch of bad guys that wanted to throw him in a well.
Yeah.
And he said, "The king can do nothing to oppose you."
Mm-hmm.
That was his quote to the bad guys.
Yeah.
He was a wimp.
Yeah, he was. The historical stuff in Jeremiah is really fun to read. It is.
Then he got to cook his food over some poop.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't
But-
a human poop first, and he was like,
He
"I can't
appeals.
file myself quite that bad."
Well, I think that does he do that as well? I know Ezekiel does.
Oh, Ezekiel.
I think that's
Oh,
Ezekiel.
that's
Yeah.
Ezekiel.
By the way, the Ezekiel bread in the freezer at your grocery store, that was a curse to eat that bread. It was a sign of the cursing of God's people, because it was cooked over. It was supposed to be cooked over human dung. And Ezekiel says, that's really gross. And God says, okay, cow dung. But it's still equally unclean. And that's the message of that bread, that you are unclean. And so it's funny that Christians who are eating God bread are actually eating the curse.
Wait, that's a real thing?
Yeah, in your freezer, in the freezer at your grocery store, there's Ezekiel bread, and it's the same recipe that God tells Ezekiel to make bread from.
But not cooked the same way?
I don't think they're cooking it over dung.
I
Yeah,
would hope not.
hope not.
That would be a very bad food regulation issue.
It would, yes.
I think it's best just not to take a chance.
All right, Brenda, would you read that first bullet for us?
At the time of the final exile, 586, the Babylonians let Jeremiah stay in Judah with the few poorest Israelites that the Babylonians left in Judah.
Who needs them? Right? That's the attitude in the ancient world. Who needs them? So the poorest and the least skilled are left behind, basically so the land doesn't get overrun. Okay, go ahead.
King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon placed the Israelite Gedaliah as governor over the Israelites who remained in Judah. But Gedaliah was assassinated by another Israelite, Ishmael, who later fled.
Not the same Ishmael who lived 1,000 years before. Okay, he's not still alive. All right, next, Bill.
Lastly, and against the Lord's instructions through Jeremiah for the people to stay in Judah, the people fled to Egypt. Jeremiah left with them to go to Egypt to minister to them there.
Okay. So Jeremiah, just get the sense of the scope of his ministry. Starts out with Josiah as, 13 plus 8, so as a 22, 21-year-old. And all through those kings, sees all three deportations, sees Daniel leave. He sees most of the people leave in 597. He sees the temple destroyed and then burnt, and Jerusalem, the wall knocked down. He sees all that. He interacts with the Nebuchadnezzar's army. And Nebuchadnezzar respects him and says, he tells his commander, find the prophet Jeremiah and give him a choice. If you come to Babylon, I will treat you well, but you're free to stay. And he tells his commander, let Jeremiah do whatever he wants. This is respect out of kind of like Naaman, who has respect, for an Israelite prophet. And so who comes to get his leprosy removed. Okay. So Jeremiah decides to stay there, and then ends up in Egypt. So what a life, all this history that happened under him. Okay, next. Here's our outline. Matt, would you read this for us?
The time of chapters 1 through 20 are subject to uncertainty to scholars.
Okay. Stephen.
A reasonable view is that these chapters give Jeremiah's earliest speeches, given during the years of Josiah's reforms, from 627 to 622. Jeremiah here pushes the king and the people to complete their repentance and reforms.
Okay, so Josiah starts reforms in 727, but he doesn't finish restoring the temple until 622. And so Jeremiah is there, and he's encouraging Josiah to press on and the people to continue their repentance and to get everything straightened out, not just have this initial repentance that doesn't last. Okay, and so the first 20 chapters, a reasonable thing as you read Jeremiah through, these chapters seem to fit, 1 through 20, as Josiah's early reformed years, or reforming years, the early years of his reform, from 627 to 622. Betsy.
Beginning in chapter 21, the rest of the book pays no attention to chronology, jumping forward and backward in time from king to king.
Okay. If you want to know who Jeremiah is preaching to, get What's This Book About out there. It is free, and you'll see. And Jeremiah is challenging to read through. If you have the 1 year and 2 year Bible reading guide, I do this chronologically for you, so you're jumping all over the place in Jeremiah as you read through, so that, because one chapter you're reading about what's happening during Zedekiah's ministry, and then the next chapter you're back in Jehoiakim's ministry. And so I just think it's helpful for understanding if you just keep Jeremiah's speeches in chronological order, which they're laid out for you in the 1 year Bible plan and the 2 year Bible plan that are out there for you. And also listed in the outline that you'll see here coming up in the What's That Book About, the spiral bound thing up there. You'll see the chapters and the kings that those chapters were written to, okay, or preached to. So this is an Old Testament introduction book. This is a very, 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 very long version of what I've tried to accomplish in What's That Book About, which you can read in 5 minutes before you read a Bible book. This you can read in 40 minutes before you read a Bible book. A very good background. These guys taught at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia together for a while. Ray Dillard died early of a heart attack. He was a big man, big fella, in his 40s, I think. And Trimper Longman's at Westmont College, I believe, still in Los Angeles area. But faithful guys. And here's what they wrote about Jeremiah. So Mallory.
Part of the challenge represented by Jeremiah is that the materials in the book are not presented in a sequence or structure that is readily discernible, or at least an overall coherent structure, for the book has eluded interpreters.
Okay, so an overall coherent structure for the book has eluded interpreters. Or I'll give you the more personal view here. Bob.
Richard Pratt, exaggerating, I don't know what in the world Jeremiah was doing in this book.
Richard said that to us in the prophets class. He said, I don't know, because Richard was a literary structure guy. Here's what you get the purpose statements and the outlines that you have in this and in What's That Book About. A lot of them are just copied from Richard or modified from Richard. He didn't do any New Testament stuff. He didn't attempt an outline in Jeremiah or a purpose statement in Jeremiah, because it's such a huge ministry and so varied. And remember, God doesn't have a purpose statement. That's just us trying to get a handle of the book. Okay. But Richard said that. Someone said, what about Jeremiah? He said, I don't know what in the world God, Jeremiah is doing in his book. And, he said that jokingly, but a lot of truth to that, as you saw in those two quotes. Okay, Jim.
Outline of when was this going on in Jeremiah's ministry.
Okay. Pat.
Jeremiah's ministry under King Josiah, 627 to 622 BC.
Okay, chapters, and these are the chapters I'll list to you. Yeah, 1 through 20. So that's the easy part. It's the first part of Jeremiah's ministry, and the first 20 chapters of Jeremiah, you see what Jeremiah is saying during Josiah's days during these reforms. Next, Anna.
Jeremiah ministry under King
Jehoiakim.
Joachim, 609 to 598 BC.
Now look at how these chapters jump around.
25 to 26, 35 to 36, and 45 to 49.
So when you're reading in those chapters, you're reading Jeremiah as he speaks to and during the ministry of Jehoiakim. And so you see Jehoiakim's name in those passages as well, many of them. Next, Steve.
Jeremiah's ministry under King Jehoiakim.
Jehoiachin.
Him too. 598 to 97 BC. 23 to 23.
Okay, so those two chapters cover those 3 months where Jehoiachin is king of Judah there. So you have 2 chapters that make sense under Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin is the king who's on the throne when the main deportation happens. So you see why there would be a couple of chapters in Jeremiah, even though Jehoiachin is only king for 3 months. It's because he's king during 3 very important months. He's king during the time the main deportation happens. And so you have warning and communication from God prior to this deportation happening. Okay. Next. Crystal, can you read that or not?
Jeremiah's ministry
You got it.
in Judah under King Zedekiah, 597 to 586 BC. And these were chapters 24, 37, 38, 27, 34, 50, and 51.
Thank you. So you can see how that jumps around there. And this is why, scholars say, I don't know what the structure of the book of Jeremiah is, because you see these addresses to these different kings and things going on during these different kings. But again, this is all mapped out for you in what's that book about in the outline there. And it's what you're following along as you read through the 1 year and the 2 year Bible reading plan. You're literally following these down, these chapters down, until all the book of Jeremiah is read. That was brutal to put together because I had to make sure I wasn't leaving out any chapter, among what was going on in the midst of lots of historical insertion as well. Okay, and then lastly, Teresa.
Jeremiah's ministry from the fall of Jerusalem to Egypt. 586 to 585 BC. Chapter 21. 52, 1 through 30, 39 through 44, 52, 31 through 34.
Okay, so you see these little segments that are going on there of Jeremiah's ministry from the fall of Jerusalem to the time he's down in Egypt. Okay, so we talked about this before. Our original audience, exiles between 560. Why do we say 560?
That's when he was released from prison.
Yeah, that's the time that evil Merodach was king of Babylon, and he had King Jehoiachin at his table eating there. So it's the exiles after that point where Jeremiah records that because he knows it's happened, and then he releases his book to 538 when the exiles come back. And so those are the exiles by the river that we see Ezekiel by in exile. Okay, well, let's stop there and let's go ahead and pray.